Today I'm going to be reading from the book Bodhinyana. I'll just show the book here. It's a great book I picked up from an Oxfam charity shop for I think it's still got the price in it, $1.99. So it's been a great investment, and I will be reading from the chapter Two Faces of Reality. I won't be reading the whole chapter today. I'll be reading a section that I really, excuse me, I had an itchy eyebrow. I'll be reading from a section that I really like. I couldn't think of any other word. Can you believe this is probably my 10,000th video that I've made? Seriously, I have made a lot of videos over the many years from a very young age. So yeah, I may mess up as I'm reading. I'll literally just start the sentence again or whatever, so please try to be patient. If not, there's billions of other videos you can go and watch. This is going great. Okay, I'm going to begin now. The empty flag. I once read a book about Zen. In Zen, you know, they don't teach with a lot of explanation. For instance, if a monk is falling asleep during meditation, they come with a stick and whack. They give him a hit on the back. When the erring disciple is hit, he shows his gratitude by thanking the attendant. In Zen practice, one is taught to be thankful for all the feelings which give one the opportunity to develop. One day, there was an assembly of monks gathered for a meeting. Outside the hall, a flag was blowing in the wind. There arose a dispute between two monks as to how the flag was actually blowing in the wind. One of the monks claimed that it was because of the wind, while the other argued that it was because of the flag. They thus quarrelled because of their narrow views and couldn't come to any kind of agreement. They would have argued like this until the day they died. However, their teacher intervened and said, "Neither one of you is right. The correct understanding is that there is no flag and there is no wind. This is the practice. Not to have anything, not to have the flag and not to have the wind. If there is a flag, then there is a wind. If there is a wind, then there is a flag. You should contemplate and reflect on this thoroughly until you see in accordance with truth. If considered well, then there will remain nothing. It's empty void, empty of the flag and empty of the wind. In the great void, there is no flag and there is no wind. There is no birth, no old age, no sickness or death. Our conventional understanding of flag and wind is only a concept. In reality, there is nothing. That's all. There is nothing more than empty labels. If we practice in this way, we will come to see completeness, and all of our problems will come to an end. In the great void, the king of death will never find you. There is nothing for old age, sickness, and death to follow. When we see and understand in accordance with truth, that is, with right understanding, then there is only this great emptiness. It's here that there is no more we, no they, no self at all. The forest of the senses. The world with its never-ending ways goes on and on. If we try to understand it all, it leads us only to chaos and confusion. However, if we contemplate the world clearly, then true wisdom will arise. The Buddha himself was one who was well versed in the ways of the world. He had great ability to influence and lead because of his abundance of worldly knowledge. Through the transformation of his worldly, mundane wisdom, he penetrated and attained to super-mundane wisdom, making him a truly superior being. So if we work with this teaching, turning it inwards for contemplation, we will attain to an understanding on an entirely new level. When we see an object, there is no object. When we hear a sound, there is no sound. In smelling, we can say that there is no smell. All of the senses are manifest, but they are void of anything stable. They are just sensations that arise and then pass away. If we understand according to this reality, then the senses cease to be substantial. They are just sensations which come and go. In truth, there isn't anything. If there isn't anything, then there is no we and no they. If there is no we as a person, then there is nothing belonging to us. It's in this way that suffering is extinguished. There isn't anybody to acquire suffering, so who is it who suffers? When suffering arises, we attach to the suffering, and thereby must really suffer. In the same way, when happiness arises, we attach to the happiness, and consequently experience pleasure. Attachment to these feelings gives rise to the concept of self or ego, and thoughts of we and they continually manifest. Here is where it all begins, and then carries us around in its never-ending cycles. So we continue to practice meditation and live according to the Dhamma. We leave our homes to come and live in the forest and absorb the peace of mind it gives us. We have fled in order to contend with ourselves and not through fear or escapism. But people who come and live in the forest become attached to living in it, just as people who live in the city become attached to the city. They lose their way in the forest, and they lose their way in the city. The Buddha praised living in the forest because of the physical and mental solitude that it gives us in accordance to the practice for liberation. However, he didn't want us to become dependent upon living in the forest or get stuck in its peace and tranquility. We come to practice in order for wisdom to arise. Here, in the forest, we can sow and cultivate the seeds of wisdom. Living amongst chaos and turmoil, these seeds have difficulty in growing. But once we have learned to live in the forest, we can return and contend with the city and all the stimulation of the senses that it brings us. Learning to live in the forest means to allow wisdom to grow and develop. We can then apply this wisdom no matter where we go. When our senses are stimulated, we become agitated, and the senses become our antagonists. They antagonize us because we are still foolish and don't have the wisdom to deal with them. In reality, they are our teachers, but because of our ignorance, we don't see it that way. When we lived in the city, we never thought that our senses could teach us anything. As long as true wisdom has not yet manifested, we continue to see the senses and their objects as enemies. Once true wisdom arises, they are no longer our enemies, but become the doorway to insight and clear understanding. A good example is the wild chickens here in the forest. We all know how much they are afraid of humans. However, since I have lived here in the forest, I have been able to teach them and learn from them as well. At one time I began throwing out rice for them to eat. At first, they were very frightened and wouldn't go near the rice. However, after a long time, they got used to it and even began to expect it. You see, there is something to be learned here. They originally thought that there was danger in the rice, that the rice was an enemy. In truth, there was no danger in the rice, but they didn't know that the rice was food and so were afraid. When they finally saw for themselves that there was nothing to fear, they could come and eat without any danger. The chickens learn naturally in this way. Living here in the forest, we learn in a similar way. Formerly we thought that our senses were a problem, and because of our ignorance in the proper use of them, they caused us a lot of trouble. However, by experience in practice, we learn to see in accordance with truth. We learn to make use of them just as the chickens could use the rice. Then they are no longer opposed to us and problems disappear. As long as we think, investigate and understand wrongly, these things will oppose us. But as soon as we begin to investigate properly, that which we experience will bring us to wisdom and clear understanding, just as the chickens came to their understanding. In this way, we can say that practice vipassana, they know in accordance with truth. It's their insight. In our practice, we have our senses as tools, which when rightly used, enable us to become enlightened to the Dhamma. This is something which all meditators should contemplate. When we don't see clearly, we remain in perpetual conflict. So, as we live in the quietude of the forest, we continue to develop subtle feelings and prepare the ground for cultivating wisdom. Don't think that when you have gained some peace of mind living here in the quiet forest, that's enough. Don't settle for just that. Remember that we have come to cultivate and grow the seeds of wisdom. As wisdom matures and we begin to understand in accordance with the truth, we will no longer be dragged up and down. Usually, if we have a pleasant mood, we behave one way, and if we have an unpleasant mood, we are another way. We like something and we are up. We dislike something and we are down. In this way, we are still in conflict with enemies. When these things no longer oppose us, they become stabilized and balance out. There are no longer ups and downs or highs and lows. We understand these things of the world and know that that's just the way it is. It's just worldly Dhamma. Worldly Dhamma changes to become the path. Worldly Dhamma, the 8 worldly conditions are gain and loss, honor and dishonor, happiness and misery, praise and blame. Path, the 8-fold path comprises of 8 factors of spiritual practice, leading to the extinction of suffering. Right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Worldly Dhamma has 8 ways. The path has 8 ways. Wherever worldly Dhamma exists, the path is to be found. Also, when we live with clarity, all of our worldly experiences become the practicing of the 8-fold path. Without clarity, worldly Dhamma predominates, and we are turned away from the path. When right understanding arises, liberation from suffering lies right here before us. You will not find liberation by running around looking elsewhere. So don't be in a hurry and try to push or rush your practice. Do your meditation gently and gradually, step by step. In regard to peacefulness, if you become peaceful, then accept it. If you don't become peaceful, then accept it. Then accept that also. That's the nature of the mind. We must find our own practice and persistently keep at it. Perhaps wisdom does not arise. I used to think about my practice that when there was no wisdom, I could force myself to have it. But it didn't work. Things remained the same. Then, after careful consideration, I saw that to contemplate things that we don't have cannot be done. So what's the best thing to do? It's better just to practice with equanimity. If there is nothing to cause us concern, then there's nothing to remedy. If there's no problem, then we don't have to try to solve it. When there is a problem, that's when you must solve it, right there. There's no need to go searching for anything special. Just live normally, but know where your mind is. Live mindfully and clearly, comprehending. Let wisdom be your guide. Don't live indulging in your moods. Be heedful and alert. If there is nothing, that's fine. When something arises, then investigate and contemplate it. Coming to center. Try watching a spider. A spider spins its web in any convenient niche and then sits in the center, staying still and silent. Later, a fly comes along and lands on the web. As soon as it touches and shakes the web, boop, the spider pounces and winds it up in thread. It stores the insect away and then returns again to collect itself silently in the center of the web. Watching a spider like this can give rise to wisdom. Our 6 senses have mind at the center, surrounded by eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. When one of the senses is stimulated, for instance, from contacting the eye, it shakes and reaches the mind. The mind is that which knows form. Just this much is enough for wisdom to arise. It's that simple. Like a spider in its web, we should live keeping to ourselves. As soon as the spider feels an insect contact the web, it quickly grabs it, ties it up, and once again returns to the center. This is not at all different from our own minds. Coming to the center means living mindfully, with clear comprehension, being always alert, and doing everything with exactness and precision. This is our center. There's really not a lot for us to do. We just carefully live in this way. But that doesn't mean that we live heedlessly, thinking there is no need to do sitting or walking meditation, and so forget all about our practice. We can't be careless. We must remain alert, just as the spider waits to snatch up insects for its food. This is all that we have to know. Sitting and contemplating that spider, just this much, and wisdom can arise spontaneously. Our mind is comparable to the spider. Our moods and mental impressions are comparable to the various insects. That's all there is to it. The senses develop and constantly stimulate the mind. When any of them contacts something, it immediately reaches the mind. The mind then investigates and examines it thoroughly, after which it returns to the center. This is how we abide alert, acting with precision and always mindfully comprehending with wisdom. Just this much and our practice is complete. This point is very important. It isn't that we have to do sitting practice throughout the day and night, or that we have to do walking meditation all day and all night long. If this is our view of practice, then we really make it difficult for ourselves. We should do what we can according to our strengths and energy, using our physical capabilities in the proper amount. It's very important to know the mind and know the other senses well, know how they come and go, how they arise and how they pass away. Understand this thoroughly. In the language of Dhamma, we can also say that just as the spider traps the various insects, the mind binds up the senses with anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self. Where can they go? We keep them for food. These things are stored away as our nourishment. That's enough. There's no more to it. There's no more to do. just this much. This is the nourishment for our minds, nourishment for one who is aware and understanding. If you know that these things are impermanent, bound up with suffering, and that none of it is you, then you would be crazy to go after them. If you don't see clearly in this way, then you must suffer. When you take a good look and see these things as really impermanent, even though they may seem worth going after, really they are not. Why do you want them when their nature is pain and suffering? It's not ours. There is no self. There is nothing belonging to us. So why are you seeking after them? All problems are ended right here. Where else will you end them? Just take a good look at the spider and turn it inwards. Turn it back onto yourself. You will see that it's all the same. When the mind has seen anicca, dukkha, anatta, it lets go and releases itself. It no longer attaches to the suffering or the happiness. This is the nourishment for the mind of one who practices and really trains himself. That's all. It's that simple. You don't have to go searching anywhere. So no matter what you are doing, you are there. No need for a lot of fuss and bother. In this way, the momentum and energy of your practice will continuously grow and mature. Escape. This momentum of practice leads us towards freedom from the cycle of birth and death. We haven't escaped from that cycle because we still insist on craving and desiring. We don't commit unwholesome or immoral acts, but doing this only means that we are living in accordance with the Dhamma of morality. For instance, the chanting when people ask that all beings not be separated from the things that they love and are fond of, if you think about it, this is very childish. It's the way of people who still cannot let go. This is the nature of human desire for things to be other than the way that they are, wishing for longevity, hoping that there is no death or sickness. This is how people hope and desire. Then when you tell them that whatever desires they have, which are not fulfilled, cause suffering, it clobbers them right over the head. What can they say? Nothing. Because it's the truth. You're pointing right at their desires. When we talk about desires, we know that everyone has them and wants them fulfilled, but nobody is willing to stop. Nobody really wants to escape. Therefore, our practice must be patiently refined down. Those who practice steadfastly without deviation or slackness and have a gentle and restrained manner, always persevering with consistency, those are the ones who will know. No matter what arises, they will remain firm and unshakable. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, the book is Bodhinyana. And like I say, I picked it up from Oxfam for $1.99, and it's been one of the greatest books I've ever read. I would say the greatest book I've ever read. Every chapter is amazing and goes into such depths on certain things I've heard through studying Buddhism, and that can be really helpful. So I'm going to try and read a few more chapters, bits of chapters maybe as well, and a few other books as well. So I hope you enjoy that. Hope you have a great day and take care.